Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Gaura Premanandi. Sorry. Thanks. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Jai. So welcome everyone to this morning's Śrimad Bhāgavatam class. Very honored to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Prabhupāda-priya, Devī dāsī from Gainesville, Florida, Krishna House. I'm the educational director there and Bhakti Shastri teacher. And and I'm on my way, en route to Vrindavan, leaving after class. So I'm very honored to have the opportunity to speak here. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. So today we're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 16, entitled Jai and Vijay, Cursed by the Sages. And we'll cover texts 30 and 31. 30 doesn't have any purport, so I'll just read the Sanskrit, and then 31 we will repeat responsively. Okay. So 30. I'm just going to read through. Etad puraiva nirdishtam ramaya krudhaya yada pura pavarita dvari vishanti mayuparate. Translation. This departure from Vaikuntha was foretold by Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. She was very angry because when she left my abode and then returned, you stopped her at the gate while I was sleeping. So who's talking? Lord Vishnu, Vaikuntha. And who's he talking to? Whose names are? Okay, so he's and what happened? What's the context here that he's saying this departure from Vaikuntha? What's he talking about? Okay, yeah, so I'm assuming you were having classes up to this point. So, the four Kumaras showed up at the gates of Vaikuntha and they wanted to go see Lord Vishnu, but the gatekeepers, Jai and Vijay, blocked their entrance. And then there was a whole scuffle there with cursing and things, and Lord Vishnu was heard that there was some commotion at the gate, and so he showed up. But it was too late. The Jai and Vijay had already been cursed by the four Kumaras, who thought, this kind of mistreatment of people, this is not a characteristic of life in Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha is a place where there's, everybody, there's, it's accommodating, it's accepting, there's, loving exchanges between devotees. The duty of Vaikuntha Vasis is not to block people from seeing Lord Vishnu. You're supposed to be welcoming me. So he's like, you obviously are not qualified to do your service. So just get out of here, go to the material world and, work on yourselves. Anyways, that was what the four Kumaras were basically, that was their point of view. But of course, this was all, we know this is all Lord Vishnu's arrangement because he wanted to fight, and we'll hear a little bit more about that in the purport too. So he sent his devotees, Jai and Vijay, to the material world as demons, 3 births as demons, to fight with them. And he's saying here that this they're getting, kicked out of Vaikuntha was foretold by Lakshmi, because apparently the same thing happened to her. She left Vaikuntha for a little while, and when she came back, Jai and Vijay also stopped her at the gate. So they seem to have some issues with it. And at that time, Lakshmi was not happy. So, and because she wasn't happy, then they were basically doomed. So it kind of reminded me of the Battle of Kurukshetra too, that some devotees say that the trigger event for that whole war in which millions of people were killed was the insult by Dushasana to Draupadi. So, yeah, it just goes to show, don't make women angry because bad things happen as a consequence. So, yeah. Okay. Let's go on to text 31. So this one, please repeat. Mayi samrambha yogena nistirya brahmahelanam pratyeshyatam nikasham me kalenalpi yasa punaha Mayi samrambha yogena Nistirya Brahmahelanam Pratyeshyatam Nikasham Me Kalenalpi Yasa Punaha. Devotees. Mai Samrambha Yogena Nistirya Brahmahelanam Pratyeshyatam Nikasham Me Kalenalpi Yasa Punaha. Shamme Kalenalpi Yasa Punaha. Go ahead. Mai Samrambha Yogena Nistirya Brahmahelanam Pratyeshyatam Nikasham Me Kalenalpi Yasa Punaha. Okay, so word for word. Mai, unto me, Samrambha Yogena, by practice of mystic yoga in anger. Nistirya, being liberated from. Brahmahelanam, the result of disobedience to the Brahmanas. Pratyeshyatam, will come back. Nikasham, near. Me, me. Kalena, in due course of time. Alpiyasa, very short. Punaha, again. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Lord assured the two Vaikuntha inhabitants, Jai and Vijay, by practicing the mystic yoga system in anger, you will be cleansed of the sin of disobeying the Brahmanas and within a very short time return to me. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead advised the two doorkeepers, Jai and Vijay, that by dint of bhakti yoga in anger, they would be delivered from the curses of the Brahmanas. Srila Madhva Muni remarks in this connection that by practicing bhakti yoga, one can become free from all sinful reactions. Even a Brahma shapa, or a curse by a Brahmana, which cannot be overcome by any other means, can be overcome by bhakti yoga. One can practice bhakti yoga in many rasas. There are 12 rasas, 5 primary and 7 secondary. The 5 primary rasas constitute direct bhakti yoga. But although the 7 secondary rasas are indirect, they are also counted within bhakti yoga if they are used in the service of the Lord. In other words, bhakti yoga is all-inclusive. If one somehow or other becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes engaged in bhakti yoga, as described in Śrimad Bhāgavatam 10:29-15. Kamam krodam bhayam. The gopis were attracted to Krishna by bhakti yoga in a relationship of lusty desire, kama. Similarly, Kamsa was attached to bhakti yoga by dint of fear of his death. Thus, bhakti yoga is so powerful that even becoming an enemy of the Lord and always thinking of him can deliver one very quickly. It is said, Vishnu bhakta smrito daiva asuras tad vipanyayaha. Devotees of Lord Vishnu are called demigods, whereas non-devotees are called asuras. But bhakti yoga is so powerful that both demigods and asuras can derive its benefits if they always think of the personality of Godhead. The basic principle of bhakti yoga is to think of the Supreme Lord always. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 18:65, Man mana bhavamad bhakta, always think of me. It doesn't matter which way one thinks. The very thought of the personality of Godhead is the basic principle of bhakti yoga. In the material planets, there are different grades of sinful activities, of which disrespecting a Brahmana or a Vaishnava is the most sinful. Here it is clearly stated that one can overcome even that grave sin simply by thinking of Vishnu, not even favorably, but in anger. Thus, even if those who are not devotees always think of Vishnu, they become free from all sinful activities. Krishna consciousness is the highest form of thought. Lord Vishnu is thought of in this age by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. From the statements of the Bhagavatam, it appears that if one thinks of Krishna even as an enemy, that particular qualification, thinking of Vishnu or Krishna, clears one of all sins. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the translation again. The Lord assured the two Vaikuntha inhabitants, Jai and Vijay, by practicing the mystic yoga system in anger, you will be cleansed of the sin of disobeying the Brahmanas and within a very short time return to me. Jai. So this purport reminded me of one time when there was a newspaper article about the devotees, and it was a very negative article. It was, saying these Hare Krishnas, it was very critical. And the devotees, when they saw it, it was in a major newspaper, and they read the article and just like, oh, this is so bad, such bad PR, everyone's going to hate us, they're going to, scowl at us when we go out in the street now, and who's going to join after this? And so they went to Prabhupada very distressed. And Prabhupada, he said, how many times was the name Krishna mentioned? The words Hare Krishna mentioned in the article. So they went through 1, 2, 3. It was multiple times, several times. And Prabhupada said, then it's very good. Then this is not negative at all, very positive. Because people are reading it, and they're reading the name of Krishna. They're saying Hare Krishna. They're talking to people like, did you read that article about the Hare Krishnas? Those Hare Krishnas, they're called, the Hare Krishnas, they're all brainwashed. The Hare Krishnas, but they're saying Hare Krishna. So that's the point here in this purport, that it doesn't even matter what our mood is. Even if we're performing devotional service in anger or in a bad mood or out of fear or thinking of Krishna out of fear or lust or anger or spite or whatever, we're thinking of Krishna. And that's the point. So Bhakti Yoga means to think of Krishna. And by whatever means one thinks of Krishna, there's a benefit. So we saw that all the demons that were killed by Krishna, they were thinking of Krishna. And Kamsa was one of the most Krishna-conscious people on the planet. He was constantly thinking of Krishna. He couldn't sleep, because he would just think of Krishna all day, all night, 24 hours a day. Everywhere he looked, he would just see Krishna in his mind. But his mood was, of course, fear. But because of that, he got the qualification of being touched by Krishna. Like Krishna went there and grabbed hold of him. Imagine if Krishna just came and grabbed a hold of you right now. Even if he was going to beat you up, how would you feel? Be ecstatic, right? Just the touch of Krishna's transcendental body on your body, just whatever the mood was. So then he got him, he dragged him down, he threw him down on the ground, he punched him in the face, and he killed him. And because of that, Kamsa got liberation. So, and a lot of the demons actually that got killed by Krishna, they didn't just get sayujya, or merging into the Brahmajyoti, or merging into the form of Krishna, but they actually got sarupya. Demons like Shishupal and what was the name of that one Pondrika. Pondrika, he dressed up as Krishna. He also got sarupya mukti. So he went to Vaikuntha, he got a transcendental form like Vishnu, and because that's what he wanted. He was like dressing up as Vishnu. Oh, you want to look like me? There you go to Vaikuntha. So he was awarded that because of his Krishna consciousness, because he was always thinking of Krishna. So then, what to speak of devotees who are trying to think of Krishna favorably? So Rupa Goswami talks about this. He says that, yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshayat. So by any means, somehow or other, just think of Krishna. But then Rupa Goswami says that bhakti, the definition of bhakti that he gives, or at least uttama bhakti, is that it should be anukulyena Krishna anushilanam. It should be favorable, as Krishna desires. It should be favorable. So, was the devotional service, the bhakti yoga of Jai and Vijay, performed in anger, favorable to Krishna? Yes, because even though it appeared externally to be unfavorable, because in their births as Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, as Ravana and Kumbhakarna, and as Shishupal and Dantavakra, all 6 of those personalities, they all were dead set on just killing Krishna. So it looks unfavorable, but it was favorable because Krishna was able to enjoy a rasa, one of the 12 secondary rasas, which is vira rasa, or chivalry, by fighting with them. So you see that Krishna, when he fights, like these demons that are actually like just out and out demons, like the demons that came to Vrindavan to try to kill Krishna, Krishna just polishes them off really quickly. He just like punches them or just rips them apart, or just goes in the belly and expands. And if you look at all those different demons, he doesn't mess around. He just polishes them off as soon as they appear. But then these demons that, were Jai and Vijay's incarnations as demons, he really plays like the cat and mouse game, like with Lord Nrsingadev and Hiranyakashipu. There's like a fight that goes on for days. It's like Hiranyakashipu approaches him, tries to attack him. Nrsingadev throws him. He comes back, and there's like it's drawn out. Like he's relishing it because it's actually a loving exchange between Krishna and his devotees. So with people who are not devotees, then Krishna, he doesn't enjoy the exchange because it's, Krishna likes to have exchanges with devotees. That's what he does. He enjoys loving exchanges with devotees. That's his nature in the different rasas. And another good example is Jambavan. The fight with Jambavan went on for days, like 27 days, I think. And 2 of them were fighting, and then finally Jambavan realized that, oh my God, this person that I'm fighting with is actually my worshipful Lord, Ramachandra. And then he surrendered. So it's just very interesting that Krishna, he likes to fight, but he doesn't want to fight with people that are actually horrible. He just doesn't want to even deal with them. He just avoids those people. He wants to enjoy. He doesn't enjoy with demons. He enjoys with devotees. So in order for him to really enjoy the vira rasa, then his devotees have to take birth as demons. Of course, you could say, well, he wrestles with the cowherd boys. That's fighting too. But it's not the same. That when you fight with your friends, it's like it's all in good fun, right? It's like you don't really want to hurt each other. So you can't really get into it in the same way, in the same, like, the rasa is not so intense. But when somebody really wants to kill you, and you really want to kill them, and you're fighting to the death, you're not holding back. That's like a good fight. That's something that really like brings up the adrenaline and the whole like that mood. So that Krishna likes that. It's very pleasing to Krishna. So it's Krishna is Akhila Rasamrita Murti. He is the form of the Lord who relishes all 12 rasas. He's the only form that is able to enjoy all 12 rasas with devotees. So the 5 primary rasas, Shantaras, Dasiras, Sakya rasa, Vatsalya rasa, and Madhurya rasa. And then there are the 7 secondary rasas. Does anyone happen to know what they are? Right where? Do you know from memory? Do you know from memory?
I just looked at them. So
Go ahead.
fear, ghastliness, chivalry. Now that's as far as I can get.
All right, does anyone know any more? Yeah, compassion's there. Wonder. That was Arjuna in the Battle of Kurukshetra. Fear, yeah, Maharaj mentioned. There's one missing. Humor. Comedy. Joking. Krishna likes joking. So these rasas are like, everyone has a primary rasa with Krishna, which is, sometimes it's explained like if you have a deep river. So there's a current in the river that's always going in one direction. Underneath, it's always going in one direction. But sometimes on the surface, there's something else happening. Like if there's a strong wind that's blowing, then the surface layer of water will be actually moving the other way. Or if there's a shallow area near the edge, near the shore, there might be some backwater, some whirlpool, or the water is actually flowing back and then joins in. So on the surface, the mood towards Krishna can change temporarily. But underneath, the mood of whatever the primary rasa is, or the sthayi bhava. It's called sthayi bhava. Sthayi means fixed. You can remember because sthayi is like stay. That is the one that's there to stay. That's your primary rasa. And then from time to time, these secondary rasas may come, like waves going in different directions, and they enhance the relationship. They actually nourish the sthayi bhava because they bring up new shades of emotion, different flavors in the loving exchange that broaden the relationship and make it new and fresh and interesting for both Krishna and the devotee. So, these rasas are really, there's a whole science of rasa. The Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Rupa Goswami explains it very scientifically. But this verse is all about remembering Krishna. So whatever mood we remember Krishna in, that is fine. And for devotees, it's just another flavor. It's just another rasa. So even anger, like some of these secondary rasas, they appear to be very like antagonistic, like anger and dread and ghastliness, chivalry. They don't look very loving and happy and peaceful. But nobody ever said Krishna consciousness was going to be peaceful and always happy. And, just look at the residents of Vrindavan, what they go through, and all the devotees of Krishna, what they go through. But these things like they churn the heart. They churn up emotions, and they create an intensity of experience in the relationship. And that's actually what we want. We don't want to be happy, happy, happy all the time. We actually want intensity of experience, right? And that's why people go to see horror movies. And that's why people read mystery novels and, that kind of thing, because it's enjoyable. It's a pleasure. And so we experience those same rasas, those same moods in relation to Krishna, some more than others depending on what their rasas, their eternal constitutional relationship with Krishna is. So remembering Krishna in any one of these moods is good for the devotee. We just have to somehow or other think of Krishna. And that's actually the goal of every single thing that we do. That's why we wake up early in the morning. That's why we chant Hare Krishna. That's why we come to Mangal Arati. That's why we do our services. That's why we offer Guru Puja. That's why we have a spiritual master. That's why we, see the deities. And take Charanamrita and eat Krishna Prasadam and go out on Sankirtan. And it's all just, the goal is just to always remember Krishna and never forget him, right? There's that famous verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Smartavya Satatam Vishnur Vismartavyo Najatu Chit Sarve Vidi Nishedham Syur Etayor Eva Kinkara. So that all the rules and regulations are just servants of these two most important principles, which are actually the same principle, it's said in a different way. Always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So, yeah, that's a good way to understand. Sometimes we wonder, what to do in our spiritual lives, what's favorable, what's unfavorable, because to surrender to Krishna means to accept what's favorable and reject what's unfavorable. So then the basis, the sort of like ground, the basis for that decision, deciding what's favorable and what's unfavorable, is what helps us to remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. And that's the duty of all human beings. In the beginning of Śrimad Bhāgavatam, when the sages ask all those questions, they pose those 6 questions to Sutta Goswami. Then one of them is, what is the ultimate good for all people? And Sutta Goswami answers that in the 2nd chapter, where he says a lot of things. But he concludes with this verse, which is 1-14. Tasmad ekene manasa bhagavan sattvatam pati shotavya kirtitavyasya dhyaya pujaschya nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. So, this is the duty. If we want to do ultimate good for ourselves and for others, then we need to do everything we can to achieve these things. Hearing about Krishna, glorifying Krishna, remembering Krishna and worshiping Krishna, and inducing others to do the same. This purport is all about remembering Krishna, always thinking of Krishna. So the word here is dhyaya. Dhyaya, it's the same as dhyan, like in the chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, dhyana yoga. So dhyaya means remembrance or meditation. It means focused meditation. And in the next verse, 1-15, then Sutta Goswami continues on this theme. He's really emphasizing the meditation. And he says, Yad anu dhyasina yukta karma granti nibandhanam chindanti kovidastasya ko nakuryat kataratim. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of karma by remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? So when we hear the message of Krishna, we hear about Krishna, then that brings remembrance of Krishna. And then this remembrance is like a sword. Like in Bhagavad Gita, there's a Sanskrit term, Gyan Asina, the sword of knowledge. So here in this 1-15, there's Anudhyasina. So Anudhya. Dhya is dhyan, or remembrance, or meditation. And Anudhya means continual. So Anudhya Asina, the sword of continual remembrance of Krishna. What does that sword do? It cuts through the binding knots of karma. It cuts through the karma granti nibandhanam. So granti means knot. So the knots that are tying us to the cycle of repeated birth and death in this material world is our karma, is our reactions to all the things that we've done, both good and bad, in this world. And so chindanti, it just slashes those, it cuts the knots. And when the knot is cut, then the ropes just fall away, and then we're liberated, then we're free. We can actually act on the spiritual platform, and we can get out of the cycle of repeated birth and death. So he said that an intelligent person does this. And then he says, who wouldn't do this? Like, who would not? It's so simple to just hear about Krishna and think about Krishna and get free from all the suffering in this material world. It's such a simple thing. Therefore, who would not pay attention to his message? Well, obviously a lot of people, because there's only less than 10 people in the room here hearing the message of the Bhagavatam, and so many people in the city of New York who are not paying attention. So we have a big job to do. And Maya is very strong. But yeah, at least you are very fortunate, because just by hearing and remembering Krishna, we're sitting here in the room with Krishna, hearing about Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna, and remembering Krishna. So that remembrance of Krishna, it purifies us inside and out. Just like whenever we have a ceremony, like initiation or wedding or something, before any yajna, we always chant this mantra. Om apavitra pavitra va sarva vastam katopi va yatsmaret pundarikaksham sabhaya bhyantara shuchihi Shri Vishnu, Shri Vishnu, Shri Vishnu. So yatsmaret pundarikaksham. Smaret means remember, and pundarikaksham, who is that? The lotus-eyed Lord. Yeah, so Krishna. But just by remembering Krishna, then sa bahya abhyantaram suchihi. Bahya means outside, like bahir nirsingho, hriday nirsingho. So bahya, we get purified externally, and also abhyantaram, internally. Just by remembering, just by thinking of Krishna, we get totally purified. So this remembrance of Krishna is very strong. It purifies us of all of our, anarthas and misconceptions and false ego and all these things. It just gets rid of all the blockages in our lives that are keeping us apart from Krishna. And then not only does it remove the bad things, but it also bestows upon us everything good, all auspiciousness and everything. I was studying the 12th canto recently. I just finished the Bhakti Vedanta course with VIHE. So we did a really amazing, intensive, systematic study of the Bhagavatam. And when I read this purport, I remembered this verse. It's 12:55. I'll just read the English here. It says, remembrance of Lord Krishna's lotus feet destroys everything inauspicious and awards the greatest good fortune. It purifies the heart and bestows devotion for the Supreme Soul, along with knowledge enriched with realization and renunciation. So the words there in the verse are, so these are the things that remembering Krishna gives us. 12:55. Bhakti, jnana, vijnana, and viraga. So viraga, or vairagya, as we are more familiar with it, renunciation, and then jnana, knowledge. It just bestows knowledge upon us. And then not only knowledge, but vijnana, realization, realized knowledge. So it's not just intellectual, like, yeah, I know, but it's like, yeah, I really know, like, I really get it, like, I feel it, and I'm living it. And then bhakti, devotion. So all of these things awaken just by remembering Krishna. And then Prabhupada says here in the purport that the best way to remember Krishna, and he says this all throughout Bhagavad Gita chapter 8 purports, like so many purports in that chapter, it's just like, the best way to remember, you have to remember Krishna at the time of death, and the way to go back to Godhead, and the way to remember Krishna is chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So then someone might think, all right, well, the goal of my life is to remember Krishna, and the best way to remember Krishna is chant Hare Krishna. So should I just stop everything that I do and just meditate on Krishna, just like close my eyes and think of Krishna and go chant 192 rounds every day like Haridas Thakur? No, that's not advisable. So we can't imitate Haridas Thakur. And so for us, Krishna's recommendation is the same as his recommendation for Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita 8:7. He says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhya cha. So he says that remember me and fight. So of course Arjuna is a Kshatriya and he's on a battlefield, so his service is to fight. We all have our own fights, right? Your fight may be going out and doing kirtan on the street. Your fight may be getting up and dressing the deities. Your fight may be cooking for the devotees. Your fight may be taking out the garbage. Fighting with those garbage bags after festival, right? Prabhupada Vishnu Swami, he was telling me. So, Prabhu. So yeah, we all have our fights. And we have our external fights and we have our internal fights. But armed with knowledge, we have to stand and fight. But while fighting, we have to remember Krishna. And actually the remembrance of Krishna is the most important thing. The more important thing is to be Krishna conscious. And that's why Krishna says that first. He says, Mam Anusmara first, and then he says Yudyam Cha. So first of all, your primary duty, most important service, remember me. And then fight. So before we do any service, whatever our service is, we should fix our mind on Krishna first and then do the service and continue doing the service. Anusmara, right? What was the other word? Anudya. Yeah, anudya, the anudyasina. Just continually meditate on Krishna. Just continue to remember Krishna. And then whenever we forget Krishna, then bring the mind back. Of course, some services may be so like mentally engaging that you can't just like think about Krishna. But the great thing about bhakti is that the service that we do for Krishna, if we're actually doing it with the intention of serving Krishna, then that service is non-different from Krishna. So by absorbing our minds in our service, that's also Krishna consciousness, because bhakti is absolute. The service, there's the servant, the served, and the service. Those three things. And when it's done in actual Krishna consciousness, then it's all on the transcendental platform and it's all absolute. So there's this three things: the servant, the served. So the servant is us, the devotees. The served is Krishna, and there's the service, what we do for Krishna. And when it's done on the absolute platform of transcendental Krishna consciousness, then it's all, it all just merges into transcendence. Right? Like that verse from Bhagavad Gita 4:24, where he says that, do you know the translation exactly? Say the Sanskrit. Yeah, so he says that he says that basically when whatever is done in transcendental Krishna consciousness, everything just merges into transcendence. So he's giving the example of the sacrifice. So he's saying, I am the butter, I am the mantras, I am the performers, all these things. No, not that I am, but it's spiritual. The person performing the sacrifice is spiritual, the act of sacrifice is spiritual, the butter is spiritual, the fire is spiritual, the spoon that you're spooning it in there with is spiritual. It's all just spiritual. Yeah, I love that verse. So he's using like a metaphor, that everything that we do is an act of sacrifice. So whatever your butter is, right? Whatever your fire is. And then after that he explains, that chapter is actually very mystical, where he's talking about the brahmachari offers this into the fire of this, and the grihastas offer something else into the fire of something else. So each of us in our services, we have something that we're offering into something, right? When we're doing japa, we're offering, our sense of, our power of speech into the fire of the Harinam Sankirtan Yagya. Like that. So, and all those things are transcendental, and all those things are spiritual. So, remember Krishna and fight, whatever our service is, whatever our fight is. And then as we go on doing our services, then our smaranam, our remembrance, our meditation on Krishna will deepen. It will become more, it will progress. So in Nectar of Instruction, text 8, purport, Srila Prabhupada goes through a very wonderful explanation, which is based on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary on that verse about the progressive stages of Krishna Smaranam. And so there are 5 stages of Krishna Smaranam, which starts with Shravana Dasha, or hearing, the stage of hearing. So at that stage, when we hear about Krishna, we remember Krishna. So you're sitting in a class, or you're, hearing someone read Bhagavatam or Krishna book. Then by hearing about Krishna, you remember Krishna. But when you're not hearing about Krishna, your mind's somewhere else. But as soon as somebody will say, hey, Hare Krishna, then you remember Krishna. Or as soon as somebody will start telling you, hey, this pastime, I was reading about this pastime, or Krishna did this, then you'll remember Krishna. But as soon as that hearing is gone, you go to the next activity, you forget Krishna. So but at least while you're hearing, you remember Krishna, that's there. So it's Shravana Dasha. Then the next stage is called Varana Dasha. So Varana, Prabhupada translates there as acceptance. So after so much hearing about Krishna and hearing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness and of course associating with devotees who we are hearing from, then we accept Krishna. We accept. Varna actually means choose. It means that I choose to become a devotee. I choose to live a life, mold my life in such a way that I can always remember Krishna and never forget him. So at that stage, we're making a conscious choice now to remember Krishna, to hear more. In the beginning, we're just coming and we're learning about Krishna, we're checking it out, we're learning the philosophy. Then there comes a point where I surrender. This is what I want to do. I'm choosing Krishna. And at that stage, we want to learn. We're eager to hear. We're trying to remember when we chant. We're attached to those things. So then the next stage is Smarana Dasha, which is literally the stage of remembering. And then this stage has 5 sub-stages within it. So the first stage is just Smarana, which means recollection. So then we're remembering Krishna sometimes, but we're easily distracted. Like japa, sometimes you're saying Hare Krishna, you're thinking of Krishna, other times your mind's wandering. So that's the beginning stage of Smarana. And then the next stage is Dharana. So Dharana is when our remembrance of Krishna is somewhat sustained. Dhar means to hold, right? Like Giri Dhar means the holder of Govardhan Hill. So when we can actually hold Krishna in our mind for a sustained period of time, then that's called dharana. And this is the reason that we can remember Krishna for a longer period of time is because we're developing attachment to Krishna. So it's not just that we hear and we're just like, oh, thanks for reminding me of Krishna, and then forget the next minute. But it's like you remember Krishna, you remember some pastime of Krishna, and you're like, oh yeah, Krishna is so cool. Like, I really love the way Krishna did that. And the way he interacts with the devotees in that pastime is so sweet. And you go on, like, remembering it and reflecting on it and just thinking about it and how nice Krishna is and how wonderful Krishna is and how happy you are to be a devotee of Krishna and how you wish you were a better devotee of Krishna, right? And so it's sustained. But that's not yet constant, but it's you're doing pretty well at that point. Then the next stage of Smarana Dasha is Dhyan. So this is when the meditation broadens. It kind of like opens up. So now it's not just Krishna's name or Krishna's form or seeing the deity or hearing a pastime of Krishna or seeing a devotee of Krishna that reminds you of Krishna, but everything starts to remind you of Krishna. When you're walking down the street, there'll be so many things that you'll see that will act as like udipanas, that will stimulate your remembrance of Krishna. And you start to see everything in relation to Krishna and everything as resting in Krishna, everything as energies of Krishna. And you start seeing that it's not just my bead bag and the temple and, these things that help me to be Krishna conscious, but actually everything, the whole world is just paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service. Like everything out there is just like potential to be engaged in Krishna's service. So that way our meditation of Krishna becomes very broad. It opens out and it becomes kind of all-encompassing, that we start seeing Krishna everywhere and remembering him everywhere. And then the fourth stage within Smarana Dasha is Anusmriti. So there's that word anu again, which is continual. So then the broad meditation becomes constant. So we're constantly being reminded of Krishna everywhere. It just flows. Like one remembrance of Krishna just flows into another remembrance of Krishna. And we see something else that just, stimulates another aspect of remembrance of Krishna. And then that we see another thing. Oh yeah, and that too. And, it's just continual. It's just like the river that's flowing to Krishna. And then another aspect of the anu in Anusmriti is, that following, and that nectar of devotion, nectar of instruction text state, that word is there, tad anuraga jananugami, that following in the footsteps of those who have anurag, of those who are deeply attached to Krishna's devotional service. So that's what Anusmriti also indicates, that at this stage of remembering Krishna, we're not just remembering Krishna, but we're remembering in a particular mood, which is following in the loving mood of an eternal associate of Krishna. Yeah? Instruction. Yeah. Text 8. Purport. Yeah. Text 8. Yeah. So yeah, it's super sweet. You can look it up afterwards. All right, so then, so Anusmriti means, yeah, it's just flowing. It's deep meditation, it's flowing, it's constant meditation, it's broad meditation. And here you're starting to develop an attraction to a ragatmika bhakta, basically. And then the fifth stage of smarana dasha is samadhi, when that anusmriti becomes completely unobstructed and deeply absorbed. It becomes like a spiritual trance. Samadhi means trance. So those are the stages of smarana dasha, which are still just the third stage of progressive Krishna smarana. So then when samadhi becomes fully developed, then it comes to the fourth stage of Krishna smaranam, which is called sampati dasha. Sampati means attainment, and it also means attainment of a great treasure, something very valuable. And this attainment is that one understands one's own constitutional position. So now you're remembering Krishna, you're meditating on Krishna, his name, his form, his qualities, his pastimes. And it's not just that you're seeing, like watching television or watching a movie where you're just like visualizing the pastime taking place. But sampati means that you're seeing yourself as in the pastime, like you are an actor in the pastime, internally in your mind. So in this way, there's an awakening of one's true identity, like waking up from a dream and remembering who you are. We sleep at night, you wake up, and while you're sleeping, you forget everything. But when you wake up, you're like, oh yeah, oh my God, I have a flight today. I have to give class this morning. I have to be downstairs at 4:30, and I should say goodbye to Gopal Champu before he flies to Gainesville. And you remember all the things that you want to do. So like that, there's an awakening. We awaken and we realize, oh my God, I'm not this body. I have nothing to do with this body or this world or my family or whatever, this mind and all these things that happen to me. I'm a totally other person, and there I am. Like, that's who I am, there, and Krishna and Radharani and the cowherd boys and the gopis and the spiritual world, and I'm a part of that, and that's who I am. And God knows how I ended up here, So anyways, so at that stage, that's that stage when that awakening happens, then the person, devotee, becomes eligible to perform raga nuga bhakti, because you actually know what your spiritual form is, and you're attracted to a particular person who performs devotional service in a mood that you want to serve Krishna in, and so we can follow in the footsteps and perform that service internally, even while we're still here. So it's kind of like an internal service, manasa seva, and an internal residence in Vrindavan. At the same time, externally, we continue to act like just a regular devotee, doing all the same things, morning program and japa and service and sankirtan and cooking or whatever it is that we do. So there's an internal life and an external life that are both very rich and very inspiring. And then the final stage of Krishna Smaranam is called Vastu Siddhi, where Vastu means actualization, and Siddhi means perfection. So that's when one actually leaves the body and goes back home, back to Godhead, goes to Goloka, to eternally serve Krishna in that same form that we remembered Krishna throughout our lives. There's a very sweet verse, it's one of my favorite verses from the Bhagavatam 3:9-11, that says that whatever... I forgot the verse. I did know this verse at one point. Can someone look it up quickly? See who gets it. 3:9-11 Bhagavatam. I might have it here. Oh, you have it? Oh, sweet. This is such a nice verse. Tvam bhakti yoga paribhaviti hrit saroja ase shrutekshita pato nanunata pumsam Yad yad dhiyata udugaya vibhavayanti tad tad vapu pranayase sadanugrahaya. So oh my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears. This word is nice. Shrutekshya. Shruta means hearing, and ikshita means seeing. So when we hear about Krishna, we can actually see Krishna's form. When we hear the pastime, we can see Krishna's pastimes. And we remember a particular form. So like if I would ask all of you right now to think of Krishna, just like visualize Krishna in your mind, each one of you are going to have a different visualization, right? Like the Krishna that Maharaj is thinking of is going to be different from the Krishna that Prabhu Vishnu Prabhu thinks of, is going to be different from it's going to be different from everybody's image of Krishna. It's going to be older, it's going to be younger, it's going to be in this pastime and that, it's going to be dressed a certain way, it's going to be more opulent, more simple. So like that. One's going to be surrounded by certain devotees, others surrounded by other devotees. So we all have a particular attraction. We have an attraction to Krishna in a particular form, particular mood. And that's the form that we meditate on when we chant japa, when we serve Krishna, when we just think of Krishna. So it says that the devotees see Krishna through the ears, through the process of bona fide hearing, and their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you. So, yad yad dhiya. Dhiya means meditation, right? We're talking about dhyan, and dhiya means also intelligence, that you focus your mind, your intelligence on. Yad yad dhiya, tad tad vapu. Whatever you meditate on, then tad tad, that same vapu, that same form, Krishna will appear before you as. So, the idea here is that we serve Krishna internally at advanced stages of bhakti, meditating on Krishna, meditating on particular services that we're doing for Krishna, in Vrindavan, in our eternal constitutional relationship with Him. And then when we leave these bodies, we enter into we see that same form of Krishna that we meditated on. We enter into the same service that we were aspiring to do internally for, these years of our lives at advanced bhakti. And that's kind of like the deeper meaning, too, of this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti konteya sada tat bhava bhavita. It's almost the same. The language of the verses is parallel. Yam yam vapi tam tam evaiti. So yam yam vapi smaram, whatever you remember at the time of leaving your body, then tam tam evaiti konteya, that state you will attain without fail. And he particularly says, sada tat bhava bhavita, that bhava, that mood, bhavita, will become your state of existence. So, it's a nice meditation, and I really like these stages of Krishna Smaranam because they're applicable to everyone, because we're all at one of these stages, right? Everybody who's a practicing devotee is at one of these stages. And it also gives us a pathway, it gives us a roadmap for progressing in Krishna consciousness and what we can look forward to in the future, and developing more deeper, broader, more continual, sustained remembrance of Krishna, and how that leads to us understanding our eternal relationship with Krishna, and how that also leads us to going back home, back to Godhead, and actualizing our meditation by being reinstated in our constitutional positions. So that's what's happening here with Jai and Vijay, is that they're remembering Krishna in anger, which is the mood that, having a loving exchange in that secondary rasa of anger. And by doing so, they're becoming purified, and their remembrance of Krishna is becoming more constant, more sustained, more deep, and they go back to Krishna, which is what he says. He says, Pratyeshyatam nikasham me, that very soon you will come back to me and be near me once again. So, same for us. We will very soon, by performing devotional service, bhakti yoga, in whatever mood, will become purified, and very quickly we will come back to Krishna, and we will be once again near him. in a very short time. He says, Kalein alpiyasa punaha. You'll come to me again, you'll be with me again in a very short time. Jai. Any questions or comments on these topics? Yes, Maharaj.
When I looked over this verse this morning, a verse popped into my mind. I wasn't sure where it was, and I looked it up, which appears to be on the same topic. And that's in the first chapter of the 7th canto, where Parikshit asks about why the Lord took the side of the demigods against the demons, and then later he asks the question of how the demons are delivered, and the whole thing comes up about Shishupal. And so Yudhisthira saw that when Krishna took off Shishupal's head by the Sudarshan Chakra, that the life force came out of Shishupal and entered into Krishna's body. And that was kind of unusual. He thought that's odd. You know, the yogis try for so many hard austerities to enter into the body of the Lord. But here was a demon, or someone who was very inimical. And then there's this verse, Gopya kamad bayat kam so, dveshas chadya deo nripaha, sambandha vrishna sneha yuyam bhakta vayam vibho, which is, 7.1.31, Gopya kamad bayat kam so, dveshas chadya deo nripaha, sambandha vrishna sneha yuyam bhakta vayam vibho, which is saying that different people achieve the mercy of Krishna by different means. That the gopis by kamad, by desire, bayat kamsa, kamsa through fear, dvesach through envy, chadyadio, which is a reference to Shishupal, nripaha, which is the king, so the person who's being spoken to is the king, Yudhishthira. Then we have Sambandha, Vrishna, the Vrishnis by relationship, family relationship. Sambandha, Vrishna, Sneha is through affection. Yuyam, you, the Pandavas, because that's who's being spoken to. Yuyam, and then Bhakta Vayam Vibho. Bhaktya is through Bhakti, Vayam, we, Vibho, have achieved the mercy. So this is showing that the same theme is there, that by these various processes, some of which don't seem favorable, a person receives the benediction of Krishna.
Yeah, Krishna's so merciful. Yeah, Yudhisthira's question was it Yudhisthira? He was doubting Krishna's impartiality, right? You seem to take the side of the demigods all the time. He said, no, actually, everybody's getting liberated to see, like Shishupal and all these, and no matter anybody who approaches me, in whatever mood they approach me, they're going to get benefited, all across the board. Everyone, any contact with Krishna is good. So yeah, we shouldn't be discouraged. When we go out there, and sometimes people they, mock us, or they are antagonistic, or shout some profanities or whatever, because any way that they relate with devotees of Krishna also is for their benefit, actually. So, yeah. Anything else? Yes, Krishna Kripa Prabhu.
Thank you for reminding us of that verse 3:9-11, which is a wonderful verse.
It's so sweet, right?
I'm going to put it in my blog.
You got to read the purport to that verse. It's like blows you away.
There's another great verse which you didn't quote, which from the Bhagavad Gita that's relevant. I think it's Ananya Cheda Sadatam Yomam Smarti Nityasa Tasyam Sulabhaparta Yuktasi Yogina. That for one who always remembers me, I am very easy to obtain because of his constant engagement in devotional service.
Yeah.
And because that's all about remembrance.
Yeah.
And apparently that the Prabhupada disciple Jayananda Prabhu, he had a notebook, and that verse was actually written in his notebook. Yeah? Which was a detail that I liked, because I like that verse. It was an interesting point you made that although he just killed the demons, the actual demons that Kamsa sent very quickly, he really played around sometime with Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu and these different incarnations of Jai and Vijay. I was thinking about all of them, but on the third incarnation, in both cases of Shishupal and Vidarata, he pulled out his Sudarshan chakra and let him have it.
It was pretty
sort
quick.
of like he got tired of fighting and said, okay, we'll just... the last
well, the thing with Shishupal is he had been tolerating him for his whole life, practically. Right? All those insults. So, yeah. But Shishupal's mother asked Krishna. I guess Shishupal's mother got to know that her son would be killed by Krishna. So she went to Krishna and she said, please forgive my son. Whatever he does to offend you, just please forgive him. And don't kill him. And then Krishna said, okay, I'll forgive him 100 times. But after that, I can't guarantee. So you could say that the fight was drawn out up to that point, because internally he was like wanting to kill him and restrained because of his promise to his mother. But yeah.
I wonder what the deal is with Vidarata. I don't know.
With who?
It was Shishupal and Vidarata, wasn't it? Because there's two...
Dantavakra?
Dantavakra.
Dantavakra.
Yeah. I have to read up on that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's something.
Or
maybe it might have been that by the third lifetime, Krishna was just very eager to have them back. Yeah. And he was just like, enough playing around. Let's get you guys back to the spiritual world now. There's another one's very similar. I was thinking, Kama, Bhaya, Krodha, Bhayam, Sneha. Yeah. That's in the 10th canto. It's 10:29 something. It's in the beginning of the 29th chapter. Because they're asking about it's just before the Rasa Lila. There's 5 Rasa Lila chapters. He's asking, wait a minute, lusty desires? So then they want to clarify, before we talk about the gopis, let's just establish here that, the relationship between Krishna and the gopis, and how that's totally pure. It's bhakti. Okay, we better end, because I got to move, and I'm sure you do too. Grantaraj Śrimad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo.